Well, I just want to say thank you, Nanette, for having me on your show, and I'm really excited to be here. And as to your question about what drew me to computer science, it's really not a very considered story. So what happened was during high school, I wanted to go to music school when I graduated, and because of lack of funding from my parents, I just decided to go to the only undergraduate school that gave me a full ride, which was the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. And fortunately for me, I found a really wonderful piano teacher there. And I was able to simultaneously do a computer science degree. So that's how that happened in undergrad. And
That's
it's fun. I mean, it's fun to make things. I like to make anything really. So making music, making tools, making software. Um, yeah, so I think they're both very friendly fields for creatives. I worked on security and spam and phishing and malware. So I basically was hired into the security department. And then towards the second half of my time there, I worked exclusively on email. So I was responsible for preventing phishing emails from reaching your inbox as well as spam. This question actually comes up quite a bit, but I don't really see those two fields as inherently related. Uh, they both are, from an outsider perspective, like the work of playing music or writing code, and people just sort of think that's what a computer scientist does or a musician does. But actually, there's a ton of project management work and administrative work, as you know well from being the director of a small ensemble. And that work is actually very similar. Just the work to sort of manage everything and getting everything done that you need to really execute an idea. So those are very similar. And um, the process of, I mean, ideas are easy to come by, right? So the process of taking an idea, like maybe you have an idea for a program or for writing a piece, and or a piece of software that you want to write or you think would be useful, all three of those things, the process for like taking that idea and figuring out what needs to happen in order for the idea to actually get made, in a lot of ways is really similar. I mean, there's of course plenty of people who are interested in both technology and music, but it's never, for me, it's never been, oh, these are two parallel fields. I'm drawn to one because of the other. Well, I haven't been composing for really very long, just less than 5 years. I think it's been 4 years. The reason I started composing was actually pretty typical of the hubris that a lot of engineers exhibit, which is that they think they can do anything. Like, how hard could it be, right? And so I had this thought that maybe I could write some music, and nobody really discouraged me. So I just decided to do it, and I did it, and it probably wasn't very good, but it was a lot of fun. And my first composition project was actually a song cycle that I wrote for my friend who Jamie Lee, and we did it together. And that was part of what made it really fun, is working with a friend. And I what I learned about composing over the past couple of years is that it's really important to me to be able to provide music for other players, that they enjoy playing and it fulfills a need for them. And that was a project that I self-produced. Nobody asked me to do that, and I paid a quartet to play it, and it was published on the YouTube channel for Center of New Music, and an amateur quartet went to that concert and really connected with that piece. And they reached out and asked if they could have the score, and they wanted to play it for their own community concert event all over Zoom. And I, of course, was very delighted to have this happen. And I offered to sit in on some rehearsals and give them feedback and whatever they needed. So I did that a couple times, and then I went to the concert, and it was actually super touching, like even more so than the concert that I paid to produce my own piece, because there were these people who were desperate to play music together. And because of COVID, this is what they could manage. And I felt really good about being able to provide a score that they could use to come together and play music, and that other people enjoyed listening to. And that was really special to me. And so as an auditor, that was great. I went to, I think, 3 or 4 different cycles, and got to meet lots of composers and be a fly on the wall and sort of watch everybody else go through this process without having any pressure to produce music of my own, which was really great, actually, because it was already very intense just being there and just absorbing everything. So that was wonderful, and a really important part of my musical development. So my advice for composers, not being an experienced composer myself, is that you should just try it if you're interested. And the worst thing that'll happen is that you'll write something that you don't like, which is just part of learning. So I hope that anybody who's listening and is interested in composing won't have any fear about doing that, and will feel like they have the right to create their own music and perform it. And if it's bad, then it'll join a long legacy of bad pieces that is an important part of our tradition. So, you know, it's so interesting to me as a classical musician, thinking about, especially this past year, when we had this big Beethoven centennial, about how much of our concept of what makes a good Beethoven performance is based on many, many decades and generations of brilliant performers doing their best to play Beethoven over and over and over and over again. And we don't dedicate the same time and energy to new music. And because of that, sometimes when a new piece gets played for the first time and it doesn't go well, the composer may not be lucky enough to have the piece performed a second time, or, you know, enough times for someone to really understand the piece, for the piece to find the right performer and the right audience. So I would say, even if you write a bad piece, just keep going. Eventually you'll have the right combination of the score and the performer, that somebody will feel something from something that you wrote eventually, I think. Well, I'm 44, and I am starting to feel lots of aches and pains. And playing piano doesn't really help with that. Using a computer a lot definitely doesn't help with that. And all I know is that I love music and I would love to continue doing music in some form for as long as I can. And composing to me is like a natural extension of trying to um, lengthen that runway. It's also kind of ridiculous because when I first started composing, I sort of had this idea that it wouldn't be too hard because I do a lot of music and I had played a lot of music and I listened to music all the time and I just thought, okay, I have good ears. I can figure out what doesn't work, which is actually true. I know when I write something that I don't like. I don't always know how to fix it, but then I didn't realize like how painful that it would be trying to find the things that I wanted to say sometimes. And then the other thing that's happened, I recently had a piece that was premiered by a really fantastic clarinetist, Tom Piercy, and I wrote this 60-second piece in response to a call for scores. And I did that on a whim. It wasn't part of my medium-term planning or anything like that. I happened to see the call. I was busy procrastinating, finishing a different score. So I decided to spend a couple hours on a 60-second clarinet piece, which got premiered. And it was wonderful because he was fantastic. All of the work that I did musically was upfront. I didn't have to worry about it. I didn't even know it was going to happen until, the week before. And to me, that was like a perfect musical experience. Oh, I wouldn't say that I had found my compositional voice at all, really. I mean, I'm not even sure what that means. I'm purely in chaos mode right now since I started late in life. So I'm just trying to learn music and figure out how to be efficient and all those things. Well, I moved out to California when I was 20, and that was to go to conservatory for my master's in piano. And I had previously lived in North Carolina. And although my entire nuclear family is there, it was clear to me when I moved out to California that I was never going to live in North Carolina again. Because North Carolina is a hotbed of religious and political conservatism, and you can escape that a little bit in university towns, but it's very painful living in the South as a minority. Certainly being a woman in engineering was very obvious to me when I worked for Google and even in school. I mean, I think it's around 10%. There are the usual things that happen, like somebody assuming that I'm a UX designer or whatever when I'm not, or whatever. These very common stories that you can look up if you're interested in that kind of thing. As far as my racial background, it's very easy in the Bay Area for a lot of East Asians to assume that they have white privilege until something like COVID happens. And Wuhan flu is on Fox News for 24 hours straight. And then you really see, oh, well, yeah, people are getting stabbed in daylight and 8th and Market. And that was really disheartening to see. So, I mean, I think a lot of people have had that experience, though, just of noticing that that their privilege has been eroded during COVID. Because over the past, 4 or 5 years, when it's become safer to be overtly racist and misogynist and all that, um, I think it's felt like a large increase in, reported incidents and, it's well, I'll just tell you, my my first memory of a really bad what felt like a hate crime to me, um, was when Rodney King got beaten by LAPD. That happened when I was 12. And at that time, um, I don't think that like digital cameras were very as common as I mean, they were not really very common. So some ways we were really lucky that it was filmed at all. And I just remember even at 12, I was so shocked at the verdict, and just couldn't believe that it happened. And it's 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 just criminal that these things um, are still happening after decades. And I don't know if I'm more aware of it now, or if I think that's actually the answer, that I'm more aware of it now because people have more cameras now and it gets reported more. But it really felt like a marked increase um, over the past 5 years for obvious reasons. Well, what I have noticed over the past couple years is that I think more and more people are seeing the value in diversity in programming. And that's, I mean, obviously in small ensembles like E4TT has always made that a priority. And it's really been great to see even larger institutions like SF Symphony have all these guest directors that do much more exciting programming, frankly, than what was on the menu 5 years ago. And that's been great. Some things that I would like to see are, uh, I just would love to see that continue. I would love to see some of our institutions accommodate for shorter attention spans and smaller budgets. Like, for example, I follow LA Opera, and I think they have really just responded so admirably in their expansion of programming and their availability of like digital shorts that are less than 10 minutes for new or remote subscribers, and just really doing a great job in diversifying their programming. And I would love to see more of that here for the more well-funded institutions. I just find it so bizarre what's going on with, Peter Gelb, and I don't I have it's just astonishing to me that they can um continue doing the same things and expect different results. So, um yeah, and then like there is that awful interview with David Finkel and Wu Han in the New York Times. And I think that anybody who thinks that all of music is represented in a Haydn quartet is not who we should be looking to for leadership. So I hope that more people recognize that and respond appropriately. I love Haydn. Yeah, it's just that I don't want to only study Haydn or only listen to Haydn. There's so many composers that I don't know, and every day I hear something by someone that I would love to play whose music I don't know very well. And this morning it was a Adolphus Hailstork scherzo, which I just thought was fantastic. And I'm not going to try to enumerate all the contemporary composers that I think are underrated, but I'll just say that recently I've really enjoyed learning the Studies in African Rhythms by Fred Onovuraswoke. And
Mm-hmm.
those are pieces that I think are so fun, and I hope to keep them in my repertoire forever. Um, I have unsections, etudes on my piano desk. They're very difficult, so they may not ever make it out, but I totally love them. Um, and the past few months, I've heard music by Rina Esmail and Ida Shirazi that I would love to learn, and that's only the tip of the iceberg. I'm not gonna go on and on and on because I'm gonna leave somebody out. There's never enough time, and the list is always growing. One of my great joys is actually doing music research, which basically just means listening to lots of music and figuring out what I could possibly program next. That is something I'm trying so hard to figure out, and the only thing that I've found to work reliably is having a date, a venue, and an ensemble.
Mm-hmm.
And each piece so far has been a little different. So even if I can't articulate it, I always have something in mind. And sometimes it shows up later, strangely enough. Like this delayed send piece, I didn't really have a story in mind other than the title and the fact that everything was going to be sort of echo effect because of the delay of playing over streaming platform. But then after I was done, it had a very clear narrative arc to me.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's really fast, like that clarinet miniature that just got premiered. I think that's because I didn't have any decisions to make other than what to write. I mean, the deadline was that day. It was for one instrument, which only has like 3.5 octaves or whatever, and it just like eliminates a lot of angst.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's something like, oh, let's say that I want to write a chamber piece for next spring, it just opens this whole can of worms in my head of um, who should I write for and how long is it and where is it going to be and when do I need to have the score ready? And the more the more clearly I see the end performance, the easier it is to actually get something out. With the caveat that I am not particularly good at writing for myself. I actually haven't written very much piano music. My first piano piece was actually I played it in June, and I wrote it like the week before and finished the score the day before. So it was not a great experience stress-wise. Well, I'm actually pretty good at um writing for sh- uh writing for people who have limited rehearsal time. So even if I can't articulate it, um I always have something in mind, and sometimes it shows up later, strangely enough. I would say that being a pianist leads to a lot of neurotic feelings on my part about composing because as a pianist, I'm really blessed to have an enormous amount of literature that no other single instrument or vocalist could even begin to approach. And that's both a wonderful treasure and also incredibly intimidating because there's this feeling that everything has already been written for the piano and there's nothing new. There's no new way that I could say anything on piano. And um, it's not very conducive to being creative, feeling like there's nothing new to say. So it's very strange, but I actually have an easier time improvising on clavichord because um I don't know, I've just had too many piano lessons. I would love to write for a slightly larger ensemble. I don't want to say orchestra because I'm not terribly interested in orchestral writing right now, but I would love to write for like Pierrot ensemble
Mhm.
um or something totally different, like I don't know, woodwind quintet, or I don't know, something that I don't have very much experience with as a player. Part of the enjoyment that I get out of studying music is just exploring new territory, and um, I love I love looking at repertoire for instruments that are relatively unknown to me, like I don't know, double bass or countertenor or something. So So I think the past year has illustrated the need for video conferencing technology that's really easy to use for musicians. Um, Even just for something relatively simple like a piano lesson or a voice lesson. I think it took Zoom maybe 6 months to introduce music mode after the start of COVID. And that was really just like a bundling of checkboxes that would make the setup easier to use original sound and turn off echo cancellation on all this stuff, which you must do in order to play music over any any platform. So I tried everything that was out there. I think I tried Zoom, StreamYard, Google Meet, Jamkazam, Jamulus, Ninjam, Jacktrip, all that stuff. And it was all with the exception of like one or two things, it was all a terrible experience.
Mhm.
And it's just it's an incredible expense in time for all these people who want to listen to each other and play for each other, um, to go through the same silly sequence of debugging every time, right? So um, what I would love to see in music technology is just huge usability improvements, especially since we don't really know when COVID's ending, if it ends. So I'm expecting remote collaborations to continue. Yes, I don't know if this will be broadcast before my next concert, but I am very excited about my next concert, which is on December 18th at 7:30 at the Center for New Music. It's a program of new music for voice and piano, and I wrote for it along with several of my friends. So I'm really want to write some piano music, and I really want to write um, for cello, clarinet, piano. It's actually been, yes, I had many cancellations due to COVID, mostly mostly solo recital stuff. And as a result of those cancellations, I actually did a online recital series for about 2 months um, in 2020 during the summer, and that was actually great. I learned a lot about video production and streaming and what it was like to learn 30 minutes of music a week and perform it and
Yeah.
talk about it. And it was really fun to have something to focus on besides COVID and the election and all that stuff. So that was really fun. And I have to say, as much as I dislike Facebook, It's been really good at connecting me to other musicians and doing projects remotely together, like this clarinet premiere that just happened. Um, I did a remote collaboration with a cellist that was really fun, and with a singer that was also really fun and challenging. It's actually really fun to find repertoire that works remotely. And composing has been actually really good for me during COVID because I still want to make music. I don't always want to play all the time, and um, by nature, it's very asynchronous. So there's a lot of flexibility in how you can work. Maybe a little too much flexibility, but it's it's good to create. Cat and Jay. Yes. Okay. So the one for remote string quartet is called Delayed Send, and that title is you could say it's a reference to um communication lag. Um I wrote actually a bunch of COVID related things actually now that I think about it. I wrote a cello piece called Zoom Gloom for solo cello and electronic track, which had a bunch of I got a bunch of friends to call my voicemail and leave messages that were commonly heard things over Zoom, like um, can somebody's typing, could you please mute unless you're talking, or only the top of your head is showing, or you know you're muted, or lots of things like that that I'm sure everybody by now knows very well. And that was really fun collaboration. What else? My piano piece that I ultra procrastinated on was called Ice Calf back in June. That was about a walrus who had gotten on an iceberg and floated across the Atlantic and ended up in Northern Ireland where walruses aren't supposed to live. And it's amazingly, the walrus is still alive. A bunch of different marine rescue groups sort of banded together and built all these floating pontoons for the walrus to like rest on and fish from. That was a fun project. In September, I wrote a piece for a project called The Illustrated Pianist, which was based on a Ray Bradbury short story collection called Illustrated Man, where every composer was invited to create a piece based on a short story from that collection. And I chose The Long Rain, which is basically about a bunch of explorers who are on the surface of the planet Venus and getting rained on constantly, and their helmets are bouncing raindrops off their heads and creating this pitter patter, which slowly drives them insane. What else happened recently? These pieces for piano and voice that I just finished and recorded on Saturday. One of them is about our cat, who is not really our cat. She's like a part-time feral cat who moved into our yard this summer and has been getting more socialized, and I totally love her. And then the other song is a COVID depression song. It's about a lot of things that we have talked about, like Trump, and just this feeling of being totally overwhelmed. And yeah, so that one is called Swarm.